Can you give a thumbs up or something?
Yeah, we're good.
Hey everyone, welcome to this session where we're going to talk about the state of Open edX community and architecture engineering. I'm Nimisha Astagiri, here with my fellow managers Jeremy and Serena in the newly formed Open edX initiative at edX. I'm the chief architect at edX, working on our platform for about 7 years, and I'll hand it over to Jeremy to introduce himself.
Hello, I'm Jeremy Bowman. I've been at edX for about 5 years now, and I manage the architecture team. Then over to Serena.
Hi, I'm Serena Canelake. I've been at edX for around 4 years, and I manage the community engineering team.
So we're really happy to have you here with us today. We have 3 segments in our agenda. Serena will start us off with the community vision and our collaborative growth with the Open edX community. I'll then follow up to give an overview of the architecture vision and how we need to evolve our technical platform in order to get where we really need to be. And then finally, Jeremy will talk to us about our technical roadmap and a few short-term and long-term efforts to help us get there. Do note that these slides will be available for you later, so no need to take notes, and you'll also have access to links that we provide along the way. So with that, I'll pass it over to Serena and our community vision.
Thank you, Nimisha. So when we started the Open edX initiative, we decided that we needed a purpose statement to really capture the goals that we have for the Open edX community. Next slide, please. The purpose statement we came up with was to empower the community to build the best online learning platform. And we chose these words very carefully. To empower means to enable, to make someone stronger and more confident. And that's exactly what we want to do with the Open edX community. What is the best platform? The Open edX platform doesn't have any feature gaps, that the broad community of users and contributors ensure that that is the case. That the community is an engine for innovation and experimentation. And the Open edX platform is the platform of choice for online learning educators. We would like to see external adoption grow 10 times with more than 10,000 sites and 300,000 courses outside of edX.org. We're really pleased to see the Open edX platform being used in a variety of contexts, from large national learning sites to small skills-based sites teaching things such as farming and yoga.
Hey, Serena, that sounds really exciting. And it's a great vision that you painted for us. I'm curious, what about today? How are we currently empowering the community?
This is a great question. I'd really like to highlight our working groups, and 2 in particular. The Build Test Release working group is right now empowered to lead the release of our next Open edX named release, Lilac, which is coming out in June. The second is the marketing working group, which produced this conference and did a really excellent job. They also built the extensions directory that you can find on open.edx.org. Next slide, please. So how are we going to scale our platform development efforts to achieve these goals? The first thing we're trying is something we're calling the Core Committer Program. This has been a pilot program that seeks to grow the number of people who can freely contribute to the platform. Over the past few months, 9 engineers have write access to various code repositories. And this pilot has been a success, and we're really looking forward to growing the program from 9 to 9 by 9 in the coming year. Additionally, we are investigating improvements to our open source pull request workflows for a smoother and more streamlined experience for all. We're also looking forward to improvements to our developer experience, making it easier to onboard and develop on our platform. Looking forward for the next few years, we'd love to see the equivalent of 1,000 full-time engineers contributing to the Open edX platform, and see edX producing less than 30% of the total amount of code. That is, 70% of total contributions come from the community. Next slide, please. In addition to these longer-term efforts, we've engaged in some tactical efforts that have immediately made a difference on transparency and development. 2 I'll highlight is first the pull request template. When somebody wants to make a change to code, they open up what is called a pull request. And now when you open up that pull request, you see a template that asks a bunch of questions, but namely it asks, what is your change? Why are you making it? By filling these templates out, everyone can see on any given pull request what's going on, and they're empowered to participate in the discussion. The second is conventional commits. Conventional commits are a way of prefixing your commit message with a certain keyword, such as fix or feature, that describes what your commit is changing. By doing this, anybody is empowered to look through the history of commits and say, I know what's going on. I know what changed. Both of these efforts have been driven by the community, and it's been really awesome to watch these changes go through and be adopted. Speaking of adoption, next slide, please. This graph shows the adoption of conventional commits across our 100 open edX repos. The dotted line shows the number of commits, and the green line shows the percentage of those commits that have become conventional commits. And as you can see, since we introduced conventional commits in late December, the adoption has grown very, very quickly to around 50%. Next slide, please. So how are we going to advance the platform together? Jeremy's going to speak a little bit more to this in his section, but I want to highlight in the past few months, we've done a collective effort to upgrade Python. And in the coming months, we'll be looking at a collective effort to upgrade Django. This collaboration on co-maintenance tasks, that's upgrades, bite-sized efforts, deprecation efforts, it's a pile of hard work that we're really pleased to be sharing the burden with equitably across the community. With that, I'll hand this to Namisha, who will discuss the architectural vision of Open edX.
Thanks, Serena. So as Serena mentioned, we want to scale our platform development efforts from where we are today to an order of magnitude greater development capacity. Well, how are we going to get there? Answer: modular programming. Modular programming is nothing new. The term was coined in the early 1970s. As software specialists, we have relearned over and over again the benefits of modularity. In more recent history, Ruby on Rails, which is an open source software project, also switched to an extensible core model. Essentially, it became too expensive for them to support all the features under one single project. They realized that they needed to build a platform where people could add things to it and not always add to the core itself. So I'm going to talk to you today about 3 basic things that we believe will get us where we need to be for Open edX as well. Those 3 things being boundaries, extensions, and events. And we'll wrap them all up with intentionality. So first step, as with many things in life, it's good to set boundaries. Here, boundaries depicted with a box. Each box has its own set of clear responsibilities, with the responsibilities being well documented in the box's own README file. For example, in our very own platform, we have yet to make a clear separation between the code for the learner dashboard versus the code for user access control. Right now, they're currently in the same box, and they need to be separated into separate boxes. So once we have such boundaries in place, contributors will then know where things are located and where to make changes. What we have begun to do in our platform is separate our front end from our back end. Front end code runs in the user's browser, and the back end code runs on our servers hosted in the cloud.
Namisha, that's awesome, but I feel like you might be forgetting something.
Thank you, Serena. Yes, of course. We can't forget our 2 million line of code beloved pet, our monolith. Our monolith doesn't really look like this. It is really huge, yes, compared to our other code bases, but it's not a nice and simple large box. It's very spaghetti-ish inside. So we cannot easily create physical boundaries inside the monolith like we can with our other services. But what we can do is we can draw logical boundaries inside. Each logical bounded box would have its own clear separation of concerns that we can then document for others to understand what they are. So now that we have clear boundaries that we've set and determined and documented what each component does, we can look to extend them. Yes, we can extend them without actually modifying them. So for example, I have extended the audio capabilities of my laptop by connecting my own set of headphones to the core laptop experience. In order to make something like that work, you need a common interface or an API to plug in these extensions. For the headphones, one would expect a USB or headphone jack API. For our platform, we will need plugin interfaces for both the front end and the back end. So for example, imagine as a developer, you want to add a new widget to the learner dashboard because you want to present, let's say, past notes to learners so that they can study for their exams. You can do that with such plugin mechanisms. So for instance, you could do that on the front end side or even on the back end side, depending on where you want to add that extension. Thirdly, an event-driven architecture is an excellent design pattern to inform extensions or other services when something happens in a very decoupled way. The notifications can be in real time, so whoever's listening can know almost immediately that an event had occurred. So for example, that widget that we were talking about on the learner dashboard, once a learner completed that exam, the widget can be informed. And so you can stop pestering the learner to study. And this can happen, and that widget can be notified without the core platform actually knowing anything about your widget. Your widget just simply needs to listen to the events that it's interested in. Beyond informing extensions within a service, we also want to notify other extended services in the system because they will want to react accordingly when something happens. So for example, when a learner completes a course in the LMS, a separate credential service will probably want to make sure that the learner certificate and badge is properly generated.
So Misha, that covers notify backend services events, but you said we're also going to be doing a lot more front-end services. What are we doing in that realm?
Yes, great point, Jeremy. Similarly, on the front-end side as well, we want to notify our micro front-ends plus also our front-end apps whenever events happen and notify them. So here's a rendition of like these 4 different places in our platform that will allow us to have decoupled notifications of events, and you can add to the platform and be notified of things and react accordingly. That leads us to our final section of this, which is intentionality. We want to ensure that we continue an intentional outlook on our platform architecture so that we do not regress, and that we continue to support the 1,000 and growing number of engineers. Here's a snippet from Architecture Manifesto. The manifesto reminds us of our basic architecture principles, including the 3 that we mentioned above. But in addition, here are a few other pointers from the manifesto that will remind us how to remain deliberate with our efforts. For example, work to simplify beats some slippery complexity. It reminds us, let's continue to refactor as needed. Code does grow in complexity unless we simplify and refactor as we go. Code does get stale. Code does need to be removed when it's no longer needed. Another one that I'd like to call out is decision records. Decision records are a means to stop and do time box design and write down the trade-offs before we jump into coding. We already have architecture decision records and edX proposals as tools in our platform for doing so. So continue to do these along the way, and we'll ensure that our platform continues to grow in a scalable and intentional manner that it needs to be. So including these 3 pillars that we already discussed, we believe are going to be necessary for us to get us to where we need to go: boundaries, extensions, and events with our intentional outlook. And then finally, here's some links that might be useful. So if you want to know more, they're covered in this slide. There's a link to the Architecture Manifesto with a fuller version and other items there that you can study. We also have links to Arc study workshops that we've held in the past with links to the videos and slides explaining the various items in the manifesto. And there's also a link to our architecture onboarding presentation. So with that, I'll hand it over to Jeremy, who will talk to us about our technical roadmap.
Yes, so as mentioned before, in this section, I want to tie back to things that Serena and Misha discussed with some concrete items on our roadmap that will actually help these initiatives along. These were the way we're actually going to accomplish these vision in specific tasks. So next slide, please. So this is an excerpt from a architecture roadmap that's available on Confluence. It's public. Anyone can go see this. The link there at the bottom of the page. And this shows what we're trying to do in different areas to improve the way the open edX system, both in terms of community participation and improving the architecture of the system itself. And the next few slides, I'm going to drill down into some of these specific items. So for this item supporting the community vision, transparency and development. In this regard, there's, for one, the roadmap I just showed you. That's the roadmap for fiscal year 21. We will be coming up with another roadmap for the coming year. And if there's any feedback, we would love to hear it. If there's anything we've missed there that you want to see added, please talk to us. We started using GitHub projects on a couple of areas. For example, the core committers tasks are tracking there, and also progress on the OpenEdX onboarding courses. As Serena mentioned, conventional commits and the edX platform pull request template have been added, making it easier to see how the platform is being developed. And then there's been a lot of collaboration in the platform. Serena mentioned the Python 3.8 upgrade, and that involved a lot of assistance from edX and many other organizations in the community in updating our code in many, many repositories. Similarly, there was an Elasticsearch upgrade that RaccoonGate helped us a lot with, getting us from a very old version of Elasticsearch to practically the latest release across virtually all of our services. OpenCraft helped a lot in creating support for importing common cartridge formatted courses into Studio, so we can adapt content that's been created by other organizations for online learning. And in the eventing realm, Edley has contributed a fully functional implementation of XAPI and Caliper support, two common educational system eventing frameworks. And Overhang.io helped us implement a framework for documenting all the feature toggles in the platform. And then many people in the community have helped us actually document those individual toggles. I think we're up to something like 30% at this point of all the toggles documented, and we're still doing more as time passes. And finally, as Serena mentioned, there's a Django 3.2 upgrade coming up, which will have a lot of opportunities to contribute there.
Jeremy, what's the best way to get involved with the Django upgrade?
Thanks, Serena. We're doing some initial preparation in terms of just creating some automation and figuring out what the changes are in those upgrades and a way to do that smoothly for each service. But then there's going to be a lot of tasks that come out of that for actually applying that automation and doing those updates for individual chunks of code. And if you want to get involved early, please reach out on the architecture Slack channel, but we'll also be making a call out for assistance on this project. Moving on to supporting tasks for the architecture vision. In terms of boundaries, as Nimisha mentioned, there's difficulty in creating physical boundaries in the X platform, but we want to create a lot of logical boundaries. And we found an import linter, which can help us establish these and make sure that code's not crossing over those boundaries in ways it's not meant to. We're also in the process of creating standardized Python APIs for the backend plugins to use, so they need to just reach into the code of the service they're installed in order to get their tasks accomplished. In extensions, there's the Django app plugins that have been present in edX platform for a while. We actually took that framework and broke it out into a separate package so we can start doing such plugins in other IDAs beyond edX platform. There's also been progress on documenting a hooks extension framework, which would create standardized interfaces for particular types of functionality that can be implemented in different ways via extensions.
Jeremy, it's great to see a lot of these architectural design patterns that we spoke about come to fruition. Curious, so far these look like backend related frameworks, or what about on the front end side?
Good question. There is also progress to create a framework for front end plugins. That would be very similar to the Django app plugins and just create JavaScript modules that can be added into the existing micro front ends without actually having to turn them from micro to macro functions as they absorb all that additional functionality. And then in terms of eventing, we're working on a standard way of using Django signals and other aspects of the Django ecosystem to how to send events back and forth within a service and starting to do them between services. And extending that even further, we're looking into asynchronous server-side eventing, figuring out what the messages would look like between services, what kinds of message buses would be appropriate for this. There's already been a lot of work done in this regard, and there's some more on the roadmap for this the next few months. And finally, under intentionality, Nimisha mentioned that decision records beat design docs. So we've actually started putting decision records in our design docs. So for example, if you look at OOP 5 and OOP 37, there are some documented decisions on why we made some changes to the OOP over time, instead of just having a snapshot of the decision as of when the OOP was created or when it was last updated. And then there also mentioned that there's the need to simplify the code and remove things when they're no longer appropriate to have. So we have a deprecation process under the Depper project for taking some of that code and that we no longer need and removing it or shifting it off to other owners who could maintain it independently. And then with that, back to Nimisha.
Thanks, Jeremy. So that's a wrap. We went through the 3 segments of our agenda. We started with our community vision and where we would like to go. We're drawing the circle wide, and we're going to draw it even wider. And we're really looking to work with you all to get us to where we want to go. As you can see, there's a lot ahead of us in our architecture vision and in our technical roadmap. So please join us, and let's make Open edX the best that it can be. If you have any questions, join us in our Q&A session. And also you can always connect with us in Slack in the Pound Architecture in our Open edX Slack space. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.